Our first panel,
Hey,
pleasure, thank you. We have Jason Pritzker. The reason we love starting off with Jason is
we're going to rearrange.
because I know not a thing.
Oh, sorry, we're
because
late.
it's because the Pritzker organization has a big investment team. They have access to a lot of different investment strategies, and they're investing in Web3. Yasmin, as the CEO of Drive, she has been and advised the biggest pension funds, the biggest foundations in the world on making investments. And so we thought this would be a great conversation to start the day with.
Fantastic. Well, yeah, I mean, just like when Paul asked me, do you want to come and be the first speaker at a Web3 conference, I kind of laughed a little bit. I'm going to ask you, Jason, what happened when Paul asked you to come speak at the Web3 conference? Or Investor Day?
Yeah, pretty similar. Pretty similar reaction was like, and just so we're all on the same page, Claire, if you ask me a single question about Web3, my answer is going to be talk to Paul. That's what I know. Paul, thank you for doing this, by the way. Paul has been a tireless advocate for Web3 and for Chicago, and doing things like this is what's going to bring the ecosystem to life over a long time. So I was happy to play my part, and Paul wants me to sing for my supper. I'm very happy to do that.
I think everyone here is probably wondering, like what got you interested in Web3? Because you can invest your assets anywhere.
Yeah, so we were talking about this a little bit earlier. We traditionally, the TPO, we're private equity investors for the most part. A few years ago, we decided that we wanted to more formally enter the venture space. And so in thinking about kind of what are our edges and what's the right way to do that, we've got duration and flexibility of capital. And so as we decided to get into venture, we wanted to be very purposeful and intentional about how we did that, and not make the mistake of thinking that because we're good at private equity, we'll be good at venture. And so our strategy is that we want to leg into venture slowly by partnering with great managers and learning from great managers. So for this first phase of our growth, we'll be doing kind of a hybrid of direct investing and fund-to-fund work. And we're trying to take a very broad aperture to the venture space, learn about different segments or sectors within that. And if you're not paying attention to Web3 and crypto, you're kind of, in my view at least, taking a very narrow view of what the future of technology is going to look like. So when we found Paul, what we felt we found in him was an incredible teacher, a subject matter expert, and somebody with a lot of credibility and authenticity around new, exciting technology, and not to disparage any crypto orientation, but Paul is a builder, and he's thinking about the next generation of products and how we can leverage blockchain technology, and that's super important to us. We want to be builders, we want to be aligned with builders, and help create value over a long period of time. And so we thought Paul was a great partner to do that with.
I think you touch on something that is like super important, and sort of the impetus of this Investor Day in a way too. Like the hype, the talk about different technologies that may be coming into the Web3 ecosystem. But then when you're sitting up here and talking about why you invest in Web3, it's about builders, it's about people, it's about where are you going to find your next greatest founders? Can you speak a little bit about like your philosophy on when you're going into a new market, what is important about those markets, and leading the witness, but you led me there. It seems to be that the people aspect is as integral a part as, say, the market or the technology.
Yeah, absolutely. We think this comes out of Hyatt, and then also at TPO we use the same line. Conrad Hilton, way back in the day, had a really famous saying, which was, in the hotel business, there are three things that matter: location, location, and location. And the Hyatt corollary, which then became the TPO corollary, and I think it applies here as well, is our top three things are people, people, and people. We just think regardless of industry, scale, business model, if you have the best people who care deeply about what they do, and can outcompete their peers and want to create long-term value, that's what's going to win over time. And so when it comes to anything that we invest in, it can be concrete construction. I'm looking for like a nod in the audience for us. Yeah, there you go. There we go. Or Web3, it can be the most complex thing in the world or the simplest thing in the world. Good people are going to win. And that's what we found in Paul. And that's kind of how we think about the various sectors within ventures. If we can find a great person to be our shepherd and teach us how to be good partners, that's where we look. So with Paul, it was pretty quick. I mean, we met and got into business together, I think, within a month or two, because of the kind of character that he is.
And when you look at, like, when I think about Web3, I see, there's a lot of stuff happening sort of at the fringe. And, you're an LP. I've spent my entire career trying to understand what makes LPs interested in the part of the world or the markets or whatever, the funds that I was trying to bring to market. What do you think will bring the traditional institutional LP world, who is ironically, everyone sitting here is somewhat of a pioneer, a renegade, an outlier, like trying to figure out different parts of a very new technology and ecosystem, when really, the funds that invest in the founders that are building cool companies in Web3, the people that give money to the venture firms, and Jason, you're a pioneer because you're investing into Web3, but your traditional, 75% of the institutional investor base are people who have fiduciaries that are pensioners or kids who need scholarships or cancer patients, and they're actually inherently quite risk averse. And I think that's like the balance between taking really interesting venture risk in Web3 and the institutional investor base who's inherently really risk averse, like for that scale to sort of equalize, a lot of things are going to have to happen. When you think about that, Jason, like what do you think will push Web3 from that risky fringe into sort of more mainstream institutional thinking?
Yeah, I think there are a couple drivers of that. I think one, regulation, right? Federal, yep. A lot of the asset allocators are pretty bound by what they can and can't do. And so I think regulation over time will really help that. The second, I think, is more practical applications. A lot of people, Web3 is still a very heady concept, right? Blockchain is not easy to touch, feel, smell. And I think as that changes, as we start to see in everyday life various applications, it will become easier to invest in or easier to justify to a pension board or various kinds of institutions. So I think that's important as well. And like everything else, right? What is foreign to us will be native to the next generation. And so there's really, I think, time is on our side in this one, where when we did the analysis around this, kind of very simplistically, we thought, okay, if institutions have zero allocated to this today, and we think in 20 years from now they're going to have a 10% allocation, that's a huge amount of volume that's going to go into this space. And even if we're wrong, even if it's only a 5% allocation, that's $1 trillion that's going to be put towards this space. And so it makes sense to have a couple of bets and start to be familiar, right? I think all of us know and feel that focus wins. And if you know a space, somebody, I can't remember who said this to us over time, but like, it's really hard to be an expert at one thing. It's almost impossible to be an expert at two things, and it is impossible to be an expert at three things. And so focus wins. So the more you can be, the more you can learn about a space and be familiar with the players and the key drivers and the kind of the ecosystem, the better your likelihood of success is. So we just think we're at the beginning of a 10, 20-year journey right now in Web3 that will take all kinds of twists and turns. And as Jordan, my colleague, is sitting here today, we work with Paul. We don't have other portfolios where the paper value changes as quickly as it does, and we made as it does in this space. And we made the decision right away, like, we're not looking at daily marks. We're not looking at paper marks. You will drive yourself nuts if you're just looking at the volatility embedded in this market on a daily, weekly, monthly, even quarterly basis. So our view is this is a 10-year journey, and from 0 to 1, there's a lot of space between that over the next 10 years. Some will be good, some will be bad, but if we can learn and get better, I mean, as investors, not just us, but asset allocators in general, getting more comfortable with it, it will just make it that much easier to allocate dollars to it.
If you're like scanning the crowd and thinking about like who's in here, people that are clearly trying to make a splash in the Web3 space, like from an LP's perspective, what's sort of the advice that you would give people who are trying to, be real inside of Web3? Like, how do they communicate to the LP world in a way that's not hype?
From an LP standpoint?
Yeah. What do you need to see out of these burgeoning companies?
I think you just need to be curious.
Yeah.
I think you need to have a culture of curiosity, and that leads you to great people and asking questions. I think we've all had this experience where like you ask something that you're scared to ask because it seems so simple, and then like when you hear the answer, oh, that wasn't just a simple question. That was actually a really good fundamental question. So being curious, asking questions, and figuring out who's willing to answer those questions. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we love about Paul is his ability to explain complex concepts in simple language. And those who aren't willing to do that are not friends of Web3. Those who aren't willing to take the time to explain in simple terms to simple people, why am I doing this? What are the drivers of this? Why is this important? I'd say seek out those people, and we should all encourage an environment of sharing and curiosity.
I think it's such a good point, and especially when it comes to like, how do you explain complex things in a way that, people use the analogy of like my grandma. Well, like my grandma doesn't care about Web3, but when you're sitting in front of a pension committee and you're trying to justify why you're going to put $100 million behind a fund or a company, if it's not something that people can grasp in layman terms, it's never going to get there. Yeah. Right? And if you really think about it, like how many people, well, in this room, actually a lot of people, but like how many normal or non-subject matter experts are going to explain to you how the Google algorithm works? Mm-hmm. But like no one cares. I just got to figure out how to get from your office to convene, and so I think that's like very...
Which we needed Google to do, by the way. And it's 2 turns away.
We did get lost.
Yeah.
But I think that's really good advice, especially in an industry that's, not just hyped, but now also getting a lot of criticism because it's misunderstood. And I think there's not enough people out there that are trying to combat hype with just simple explanation and like logic. And I think that's like a very key component to
and by the way,
taking it off.
It's not in everybody's interest to do that, right? If you follow the path that like Web 1 to Web 2 to Web 3, one of the things I think is compelling about Web 3 is the democratization of access that it gives, right?
Yep.
You don't have to be beholden to Google or Apple or Facebook or Amazon's algorithms to tell us what's great and what's not great, what we should be paying attention to and not. Curiosity can drive that. And I love the idea that, that there's now technology available. It may not be mainstream or come to be ubiquitous for another 10, 15 years, but the technology is there to let us decide for ourselves what we want to be seeing and how we want to be using technology, which I think is super cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, right now, I think that in a lot of traditional LP portfolios, Web3 is like a hedge to their big tech exposure. And I think that, like you said, like because of the nature of that beast, like what you're not fighting against it, but you are in a way, it's going to be a rough battle. You know, I think that there's probably a lot coming down the pipe. To your point, like there's a lot of people who are interested in crypto remaining a foreign language because it will fundamentally shake the bedrock of a lot of companies that are built on something that is in complete opposition to that.
Yeah, yeah, we're looking for all kinds of real application-based technologies that will help get us there.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm a Web3 skeptic. I'm like, look, if I can go through my day, and the day that I go through my day and Web3 enables something that I do seamlessly better, that is when, you know, an individual cares. But like, you know, the road between where we are now and there is definitely a long one. We've only got a couple of minutes left, so I want to be, you know, I don't want to be the only one asking questions. You've got 5 more minutes of Jason's.
Ask Yasmeen a question. She's got a really cool story as well. I failed on that one.
If you guys have any questions, now's the time to speak up.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Jason, thank you for the discussion. It's amazing to see the Pritzker family obviously embracing technology innovation as you and the family have been stalwarts in this city and obviously the country. As people who have been, you know, predominantly very focused on hotels and real estate, things salt of the earth, if you will, you've encountered countless intermediaries, people in the middle of transactions, paper shuffling back and forth. Are you excited or are you cognizant, you know, right now to what, you know, obviously Web3 can promise in terms of removing that, disintermediate that, and make it more expedited?
Yeah. I think it's going to touch every business along the way. I think blockchain is just a super powerful technology. But since you touched on hotels, I'll go there first. Loyalty is the low-hanging fruit within not just hotels, but any consumer space, right? The traditional model of earn and burn is not sufficient anymore. Customers, people, all of us have made a decision, consciously or subconsciously, to revalue experiences over things, stuff. And so as blockchain moves into loyalty programs, we're really excited to see what that will do. So where does the rubber meet the road on that? People are poking around. I have no doubt somebody will figure it out eventually at how do you make loyalty points interchangeable. If I want to use a Hyatt point to buy a stereo, that doesn't even exist anymore. If I want to use
A Walkman.
right?
Nope.
Yeah, exactly. A my first Sony I was going to say at Best Buy, and I don't even know if that exists anymore. But you know, whatever it is,
Yeah.
the interchangeability of loyalty points is something that we're all going to see and expect over the next 10 years. And so, yeah, it can make a much more efficient operation. Now, that is in contrast to, or rather consistent with, people win, right? So you're not going to replace the power of people with blockchain, but you're going to make people more efficient, you're going to make systems more efficient, and I think that's super exciting for us. Thank you for not asking any questions about Web3. That's very helpful.
Likewise. Well, look, there you go.
Jason Pritzker from Oregon. I have a question for you about Web3.
Uh-oh. Got the mics.
Two things that you explained is now, the promise for business and efficiency and things and goals and make that better. But you also expressed an excitement about democratization. And I wonder if you'd speak to that a little bit more. You sounded excited about it.
Yeah, I think anything that gives individuals. Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry. I'm sorry. What was your name? Fred asked about why we're excited about the democratization potential embedded in blockchain technologies, and I think at a high level. Maybe it's just the rebel in me, but like distributing power to the people, I think is an awesome concept, whether it's in politics or real kind of economy. And, the Googles, Facebook, Apples, Amazon, the FANGs control a large part of what we do now. They control phones, what's on the phones. And there's just something in me that doesn't love that natural filter where they used to be the disruptors, and now they are the ones that need to be disrupted. And I think that's the natural progression in life, in anything. And so I think we're right now at a point in time where we have the basic technology to be able to do that, and we didn't have that 10 years ago. So I think it's exciting. Thank you all very much for having us. Thank you, Paul, for putting this together. This was great.
And
Thank you.
You're welcome.